friend of mine runs a tree cutting company and asked me if I could fix up a couple of derelict chippers he had sitting around. So these both have issues, starting with this one on the left. This is a Vermeer 1250, you can see there. And the problem is with the feed rollers. It has these two rollers that are hydraulically powered that turn and feed material into the chipper disc here. And the far one over here is mounted stationary, and that's fine. But this one is mounted on like this little trolley setup thing so that it can move relative to the other one and accommodate, you know, material of different sizes, of course. And the way Vermeer did that, it has like these tapered rollers. There's 4 of them, 2 here and 2 on the back, and they ride in a matching profile in this, or these 2 curved tracks. And I guess the issue is that it's only supported on top here. There's nothing that holds the roller on down there on the bottom. So when you feed material in, it tends to cock the whole assembly, and apparently it works okay when it's new, but when it gets worn, especially like when these tracks get worn, and I'm sure you can't see it, but if you run your hand along here, you can feel lots of little divots where like the rollers have jammed up in it. And yeah, the whole thing just gets cockeyed and will jam open or jam closed, and it's just a frustrating mess apparently. And evidently the only way to fix it is to replace the tracks and the rollers, and Vermeer no longer sells those parts, so that's just kind of hopeless. But what I'm going to do now is see if I can get it started and run it and make sure it is what I think it is. I already checked all the fluids, everything looks good. It was completely out of coolant for some reason, so I filled the radiator up, and it also is missing the cooling fan. I don't know where that went, so we won't run it very long. I'm going to crack the lines on these injectors and see if I can get any fuel out, or air out rather. Since we're not getting any fuel to the injectors, I'm gonna take the shutoff solenoid out. Look at it. That was just pure operator error. This thing, I guess it has a low oil pressure shutdown, and in order to bypass it so that you can start the engine, it has this little button on the dash, and when you press it, the shutoff solenoid pulls in. So that's all that was. There wasn't anything wrong. I just didn't know what I was doing. Looks like we got pretty good fuel coming out of the injector lines, so we'll tighten those back up. got a little bit of brush here. I'm gonna fire this thing up and see if we can chip it. That didn't really seem like a problem with that roller jamming in its track so much as it just, neither of them had any torque. So this thing, the hydraulic pump is belt driven off the crankshaft here, and I think it might be slipping. Got the belt tightened and I got it spun around here, so hopefully you can see a little better. tightening that belt definitely helped. It's still not working very well though, and I can see, I don't know how well you could see it, but I could see exactly what he's talking about. This whole roller setup here is just kind of flopping around as I was feeding stuff into it, and it was actually so bad it was catching the bottom of the roller on the surface of the feed tray there and kind of dancing around on that, so that's a problem. But actually what I thought was more annoying was there's something up with the hydraulics on this thing. If you just pull the bar all the way, it seems to not give full flow to the rollers, which doesn't make any sense. And then it's got this flow control valve here to control the speed of the rollers, and that thing seemed like it was just kind of all or nothing, like it didn't actually, it was just off or on, which was weird. I don't know, I was trying to fiddle with it, and like if you hold it right about here, it seems like it works the best, but I don't know, something's up with that. And yeah, I can see how that would be really frustrating to try to use on a job. Anyway, that's more or less what he said it was, so no surprises there, that's good. So the next order of business will be to work on this one. This is a Woodchuck WC19. There's nothing wrong with the feed system on this one. As you can see, it has two horizontal rollers that are supported at both ends, and the top one moves straight up and down in this track. And it has this hydraulic assist on it, so if you get something in there and the rollers are slipping on it, you can go open that valve and smash the top roller down on it and pull it in. The problem with this one is the engine blew up, or something. He said they were running it, everything was fine, all of a sudden it started pouring out white smoke and making a terrible screeching, clanging noise, and I'm not sure, I think he said he ran over and shut it off. I don't know if he shut it off or if it shut itself off, but anyway, something bad happened. So I'm going to put a bar on the crank and see if I can turn the engine over at all or if it's seized up. Put a socket and a breaker bar on one of the crank bolts, and I can't get it to budge at all. I think I'm going to go ahead and just take this engine out. Huh. I can't say I've seen that before. I believe that is the oil pickup, or the screen on the oil pickup tube, I should say. And it is completely covered in sludge. Good Lord. So I think it's a safe bet to say that it starved for oil. So I took this bearing cap off of the, I guess, the number 4 rod bearing there, and it does have a bad bearing. Here's the bearing here. As you can see, it's all galled up, and the crank is all smeared up with bearing material there. It doesn't look like it actually spun in the cap, so that's good. So this engine, I mean, it should be perfectly rebuildable. I talked to my buddy, and well, first I asked him if they ever changed the oil in this thing, and he was like, yeah, I think we did once. So, but he said he does not want to put any money into it, so we won't be rebuilding this. I'm just going to continue on with what really was the original plan anyway, and swap the good engine over to the other chipper there. So now I need to swap basically everything over from the bad engine to the good one. Ow. So I went backwards a little bit here. Let me explain what the problem I just ran into is. This is the bell housing from the Vermeer. As you can see, it has 1, 2, 3 bolt holes there in that line. This is the bell housing from the Woodchuck, and it only has 2 bolt holes in that same area. I needed that third bolt hole. That lines up with one of the holes on the Vermeer engine there. So I just used the bell housing from the Vermeer because I thought they were identical. They looked identical in every other way. And as you saw, I put everything together and it all went fine until I got to the point of bolting on these motor mounts. These little feet things are part of the motor mount setup on the Woodchuck frame. And as you can see, you know, obviously they bolt right up to the Woodchuck bell housing. But they don't actually fit on the Vermeer bell housing. They just don't quite line up. If you line one up, the others are off. I couldn't think of any way around that other than making new mounts, which I wasn't going to do, or drilling new holes in the bell housing, which I definitely wasn't going to do. So I took it all back apart and I'm just going to mark the Woodchuck bell housing for that third hole that I need and drill it, which is actually pretty easy, and I don't know why I didn't do that from the start, but I'm doing it now. So if you need to transfer a bolt hole from one part to another part, you can take a bolt that fits in the hole and sharpen it, and then get the part you want marked lined up with the other part. And in this case, this has alignment dowels that hold this bell housing to the blocks. That makes it really easy to get it aligned perfectly. And then just take a hammer and give it a sharp rap. Just once, don't do it more than once. And hopefully you can see it there. There's a little divot left where exactly where that hole needs to be drilled. I noticed one of these bolts is broken off in the bell housing, so I'm going to try to weld a nut to it and see if I can get it out that way. Oh, cool. I've never actually done that. Got it all put back together. Got the motor mounts on. So, I think I'm ready to put it back on the frame. got everything put back together. The only difficulty I really ran into is that the oil pan on this engine is a little bit deeper than the one on the other one, and it was hitting this cross member that the engine sits on. So I had to make some little, I guess like spacers. I just kind of slapped them together out of some scrap I had lying around, and put one under each foot that the engine sits on. But other than that, I think everything was just plug and play. As you can see, this is the hydraulic pump on the Woodchuck, which is gear driven off the timing train, which is much better than the belt driven one. Getting this hood back on was a bit of a challenge because I think it's had a couple hundred too many tree limbs dropped on it over the years, and as you can see, it's just been smashed and re-smashed. But I got it sort of bolted on there, so whatever, should work. I've got a pile of brush down there, so let's roll the chipper down there next to the woods and see if we can shred it up. and that's what's left. Just a bunch of chips. Well, that was extremely satisfying. The only things that I'm still not sure about, well, I'm not sure about the whole thing, but specifically that little bit of smoke that it was putting out. I'm not sure what's going on with that. Could even be maybe old fuel. I don't know how long this thing's been sitting, and it was running on the fuel it had in it. So, and the other thing was this ram for the hydraulic assist seems to be bypassing internally really bad, because it'll only move if you have the engine at full throttle, and even then it just kind of creeps up and it won't pull itself all the way in against these springs. But we're not going to worry about that. There's a million things you could do to this machine to fix it up, but this was just kind of a bare minimum type job. So I'm just going to give it back to him and let him run it and see if he's satisfied. So something that I neglected to mention when I was putting this back together, I think I found kind of the root cause of the original problem. This thing does have a low oil pressure cutoff switch. I have no idea how this got broken because it lives under the hood here on the instrument cluster. But as you can see, it's been smashed to bejeebus, and I don't know. I'm not sure how they were running it or how this happened or what is going on exactly. I'm not exactly sure how it works. There's wires that go through the gauge for oil pressure and also for coolant temperature, and they connect up to it, and it's got, hopefully you can see, this little solenoid right here. And I guess if either of those get out of spec, it receives voltage, and the solenoid pulls this little latch in, and then that releases this bar here and breaks contact and cuts voltage to the fuel shutoff solenoid on the engine and shuts the engine off. But yeah, I don't know. That's my best guess of how it works. I'm not exactly sure. This one wasn't working, so I just bypassed it so I could run it, you know, to test the chipper out. There's supposed to be like a reset button on, I think on this end, I'm not sure, and it sticks through the instrument panel right here. So if it trips, I guess you just hit that button and reset it. So it's kind of like a circuit breaker, but not exactly. Anyway, I did order a new one of those. I'm definitely gonna install it and make sure it's working before I give this chipper back to them, so they don't just do the exact same thing over again. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that in case anybody was wondering. One thing I did want to point out is I like these horizontal rollers a lot better than vertical rollers like on that machine, in large part because with vertical rollers, when you stick a piece in there sideways, when the rollers grab it, they will whip it straight. And I'm not going to say that it's dangerous necessarily, but I mean, you can get a fat lip out of it if you're not careful. But with these horizontal rollers, they just pull it in at whatever angle you stick it in, which is nice. Thanks for watching.